Hey gang, welcome back to another video. Now when you think about iconic props from horror movies, people might mention Jason's hockey mask or even Freddy Krueger's glove. But in my mind, one of the most iconic props from a horror movie is Jack Torrance's axe from The Shining. So in this video, I'm going to make one that's convention safe out of EVA foam. So let's get to it. To keep this prop lightweight and safe for conventions or Halloween, I'll be making it from EVA foam floor mats. And I'll start by tracing out my shapes with this template that I made for the handle, remembering to flip it over so that the two pieces are mirrored since the back of these foam mats have a texture. Once my outlines are drawn, I can cut them out with a sharp razor blade. If your blade isn't very sharp, like mine wasn't, you'll want to cut just outside of your lines so that you have some room for cleaning up your seams once it's all glued together. And just like that, I've got my two handle pieces. But the foam really isn't rigid enough on its own. So I grabbed a fiberglass driveway marker at my local hardware store and cut it down to the size of my handle, and we'll use that as a spine for the axe. But in order to do that, I'll need to make a channel in the foam for it to nest into. So I used the driveway marker as a straight edge and drew myself a guide where I'd cut my channel. And for that, I'll need my rotary tool and a small sanding drum. After creating channels in both sides of the handle, it was time to bond them all together. So I grabbed my Surebonder hot glue gun and some black cosplay stick glue and got down to it. First filling in the channel to help keep the driveway marker in place, and then on the opposite piece of foam before squeezing them together. I also cut more foam to make the axe head, and can glue the two sides together as well. Now that the foam is glued together, I can get down to shaping. I grab my rotary tool once again, but this time I'm using a larger sanding drum to help make quick time of the shaping process. With my shaping out of the way, I can add a small mounting hole in the bottom of the axe blade with a small sanding drum. And after a quick test fit, I can grab all of my axe parts and do a bit of heat sealing to tighten up the texture of the foam. This also gets rid of any foam bits and dust that may be left behind on your pieces. The last thing I need to do before I can get into the painting part of the build is to fill in any gaps with a bit of paintable silicone caulking. I'll spread out a bit along the seam with my finger, and if there's any uneven areas, I'll use some water to smooth it all out. I'll do this along all of the seams until everything looks tidy, and then I'll set it aside to dry. Now that the caulking is dry, it's time to apply a few coats of rubberized spray to the foam pieces. And once everything is dried, I can set the axe head aside, grab my caramel base color for the handle, and get down to painting. While I wait for the handle to dry, I shift it over to the axe head, which will get a graphite coating using some powdered graphite and clear shellac. I'll mix up a batch to a gravy-like consistency, and we'll apply it to the foam in a pouncing motion to build up some texture. This should go on the thicker side, since we'll be sanding it down to our final finish. After the base coat of the handle dried, I grabbed a dark walnut wood stain and a chip brush, and we'll use it to create a simple wood grain effect. This technique takes a little getting used to, but start with a small amount of stain and really work it across the prop before adding any more.
And once I was happy with how it looked, I set it aside and now can switch back to the axe head. With the graphite and shellac coating completely dry, I'm going to take some 220 grit sandpaper to it. This will expose and roughly polish the graphite, which will give it a realistic metal finish. During this step, you'll really want to pay attention to how much you're sanding, since you don't want to sand through the graphite. Also, the more you sand, the less texture will be in your finished piece. So depending on what level of wear you're after, will determine how much you want to sand. When I was happy with how things are looking, I'll switch over to some 000 steel wool to give it a bit of a polish. As you can see, this method really catches the light and creates a pretty convincing metal finish. After finishing the sanding and polishing it, it was time to seal in the finish, since no one wants graphite all over their hands. I'm using a satin clear coat, which dulls the shine a bit, but makes it so that you can handle the prop without staining anything. Now that everything is dry, I can get to final assembly. I'll be using my cosplay stick glue again, making sure to get good coverage, and if you have any squeeze out, you can use a razor blade to remove it before the glue sets up. The last thing I'll do is a bit of touch up with some burnt umber acrylic paint. This should hide any edges that I didn't paint and will add some much needed grunge to the piece. And once I was happy with how it looked, I could call this one done.
They say that all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, but I'm happy to report that this project was far more play than it was work. A special thank you to this week's video sponsor, Surebonder, and be sure to head over to their website to check out their entire line of products. Well, that's going to do it for this one. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, but most importantly, go make something.